philosophers and different researchers and people have talked about the impact of what we do when we're not working on our overall lives, right? In the 1960s, at least in the US, there was this growing concern among policymakers and academics that because of automation and the changing dynamics of work, that suddenly we would shift to like a 20-hour work week, that people were going to be working a lot less. And there was this concern of, well, what are people going to do with their free time? Do they even know what to do with their free time? Or they're just going to end up, like wasting their lives away. So you had this, this space where there was this research question where you had sociologists and economists and different researchers come together to focus on studying leisure in the 1960s.
This is the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah, in the 60s and the 70s, right? And asking really interesting questions. And so we have decades of research on leisure experiences. And we've learned a lot, right? And along the way, I think what has happened is we have I'm speaking from a U.S. perspective, but I think this applies other places too, is become a little bit siloed and say like, okay, we've studied leisure experiences, but a lot of times we end up talking to ourselves, right, among sort of other leisure scholars, speaking in the research perspective here. And we haven't done as good of a job of branching out and connecting to psychologists and economists and sociologists and business schools and other places to say, hey, we understand as leisure scholars a lot about what makes an experience great and what leads to thriving, right? We know ways that there's certain things we can do in our free time that are better than others, right? And recognizing that those principles don't just apply to what makes a great leisure experience. I've got an article that I cite in the 1980s by a management scholar who says, paraphrasing, to make employee experiences better, we probably need to understand what makes leisure experiences better to make work more like leisure, right? Not to make it like just fun and games, but understand like what are the principles behind experiences that make people happy, that connect people, that lead to thriving. And so I think as leisure scholars, we have a role to play in sort of spreading the knowledge that's been gained over the previous decades to influence other experience spaces, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it seems like although the original course started with different psychologists, sociologists, economists coming together and studying leisure, we share some languages from other disciplines, but we need to have more connections with those disciplines.
Yeah, we sort of all came together and focused on leisure as a context, and tend to sort of have stayed there as opposed to communicating what we've learned out to other spaces. And I think the other thing that's changed too over the last couple of decades is we used to live in a society where work and leisure were very much separated.
Yeah.
And that's a post-industrial revolution type of thing that happened. But now because of technology, we had telecommuting started, and then the pandemic happened, and everything got mashed together. And now we're trying to figure out how to peel that back apart again. But I don't think we'll ever go back to the way we were before. And all of our contexts in life are meshed together now in ways they weren't in previous decades. And so, which makes it even more relevant for leisure scholars to say, hey, we know some stuff that can be helpful in other disciplines. And I think that's, for me, talking about experiences is this generalizable place. Like, what makes good experiences? And we can take those principles and apply them in patient experience, family vacations, customer experience, radio experiences, wherever you want to apply those.